Overseas, more than 40 foreign ministers meeting in London today, trying to get ahead of next week's talks on clearing the strait. Joining me now, former CENTCOM Director of Operations and Commander of Navy's Fifth Fleet, retired Navy Vice Admiral Kevin Donegan, along with former Iraqi invasion commander, retired Marine Colonel Mike Jernigan. Welcome to you both. Vice Admiral, I will start with you. You know, everybody's talking about NATO, talking about the allies, the 40 who are signing on to maybe do something about the strait. Is the world starting to get President Trump's message here, or is this just a lot of dithering on paper but not a lot of progress?
I think it's the former, and I think it's being driven specifically by the impact that these countries are seeing directly on their own soil to the straits being closed the way they have been. That they don't want in the end to Iran when this is over to have control of the straits, because it changes rules-based order for free flow of commerce that we've all come to operate under in the business world, but just globally on how we flow things around the globe and how we pay for things.
Colonel, in the president's address last night, toward the end, he talked about 2 to 3 more weeks where we were going to hit Iran very hard. Now, I know you're not an energy markets guy, but that sent oil prices flying. I think it was a signal that we maybe aren't as near to the end as people thought. How do you read what he said?
Well, the Strait of Hormuz is a dangerous neighborhood. Anytime that we go through there, everybody's paying attention. And it's very interesting that the U.S. is an oil exporter. And as the president said, we don't need that region to get our oil. In fact, we have other oil that people can buy from us. I find it very interesting that today the Bahrainis defended against 4 ballistic missile attacks. Yesterday, the United Arab Emirates defended against 5. And this weekend, a Kuwaiti desalinization plant was hit. I think that the Middle Eastern neighbors are going to grow more impatient with Iran and join the war before any NATO allies do. So I think to the point that it's going to take a few more weeks, I think that's because the people in the neighborhood are tired of Iran being bullies.
Vice Admiral, what difference does that make? We've talked about this the past couple of days now. UAE, Bahrain, Oman, they're all in the picture here. And they're going from maybe this sort of defensive posture to we want to play a very active role in opening the strait, keeping it open. You know, a lot of people say they don't have much firepower. They're maybe not so helpful on the battlefield. What do you make of it?
Well, first, I think what we've seen from the very beginning, and you've listened to it in the statements that came out of those countries, they didn't come at this after this started by trying to pressure the U.S. to stop. Quite the contrary. They were very clear that Iran is doing and acting like a terrorist organization because they're attacking civilian infrastructures, hotels, airport terminals, tankers, all sorts of things that aren't military targets, right? And they're attacking onto the soil, even of countries that had nothing to do with it, that didn't open up their airspace. And then as this has worn on, and they've continued to do this over time, certainly these countries have capabilities, and they have capabilities to defend themselves, of course, with a lot of U.S. kit and a lot of U.S. help. But they've been phenomenal at their defense, stopping well over 90% of the missiles that come at them for most of the nations, which is pretty incredible as this has gone on. So they've taken the view from the very beginning that Iran is the one that is the bully and has been the bully. And they don't want really the U.S. to stop until Iran's defanged, and they don't want to have the Straits of Hormuz in control of the Iranians when it's over.
So, Colonel, you've got the Gulf allies on one hand, they want more U.S. involvement. They want us there. You've got our more traditional allies on the other hand. I think Austria maybe is the latest that said, you know what, you can't fly over our airspace in pursuit of this mission. That seems, if I was the president, I'd be pretty ticked off if I had allies telling me that, Colonel, frankly. I think you can see that in the president a little bit. What do you think about allies saying our airspace is off limits to you?
Every country has their own national interest and their own political electorate to pander to, but there's consequences to actions. And so these countries that are choosing not to help the United States, I think, are having some actions. And one of them is they're all meeting, as we talked about in the first segment, that they're wondering what to do about how to open up the straits. Um, and, there's a saying that if you're virtually present, you're actually absent. And right now, all of the NATO allies are actually absent from what's going on in the Straits of Hormuz.
Vice Admiral, we talk a lot about Trump time, how fast he moves, how fast he wants things done. I think he's asking the globe to get on Trump time, to get this finished, and to get prices down and things back to something more normal. Do you think the rest of the world can operate on his time frame, Vice Admiral?
Well, if I'm going to, maybe at risk of oversimplifying, there's three ways this Straits of Hormuz are open, and they will open in the end. One of these three ways. It's going to be open because it's forced open by the U.S. Or the U.S. and allies, right, together. It can be opened by negotiation. That's looking less likely, but Trump has certainly left that open. The administration has left that wide open. Or it can be open under Iran's terms. And I don't believe that the international community wants that last option to happen. Now, what they can contribute and how they can contribute, it varies by country, right, in terms of something as complex as forcibly open the straits. But if Iran looks out the window and sees that it's them against the world, it's a different look than if it's them against the United States and Israel. So my great hope is that the world comes together and decides that it's in everyone's interest to have free flow of commerce through an international waterway. We don't want to change that precedent because it has too many ramifications far beyond the Middle East.
It matters all over the world. You're right about that. Vice Admiral Kevin Donegan, Colonel Mike Jernigan, thank you very much for being with us tonight.